Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto invited Sakura, Ino, Hinata and Tenten to a luxurious hot spring? Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Are you serious? Naruto shouted at the top of his lungs, his expression and tone filled with both shock and excitement. Having risen to his feet from his seat the moment he received this unexpected announcement, Konoha's number one knuckle-headed ninja now looked as though his day had just begun again for the better. Why you mean I won? Get out of here, old man. You're pulling my leg. As it was a part of his daily routine, the 18-year-old Naruto Uzumaki had once again found himself in Ichiraku's ramen bar for the second time today, ordering his usual 10 bowls of miso ramen, with the usual cup of Chinese tea on the side. However, this wasn't to be his usual order of midday. Accompanying his usual selection of 10 regular bowls of steaming hot soup with noodles, vegetables, dumplings and chicken, Naruto was also presented with 5 free passes to Konoha's 5-star hot spring resort. The moment he saw these tickets and hear the words of congratulations escape from the owner's mouth, presenting him with his prize, the boy immediately believed that his own ears were deceiving him. Ichiraku grinned at the bewildered boy, propping himself against his cooking desk and smiling over at the boy on the other side. Ho! There's no leg pulling here, Naruto. Congratulations. As our 1000th, and may I say, most frequent customer to Ichiraku's ramen bar, you have won 5 free passes for you and 4 friends to Konoha's best, most luxurious and most relaxing hot spring resort in the village for the day. Oh man! Naruto exclaimed, looking down at the 5 laminated passes he held in his hand and slapped himself on the head. His eyes were practically sparkling, as if he were starstruck. This is great. I can't wait to. Hold on one second. Naruto looked up, raising an eyebrow at his number one cook. What's the catch? No catch, the old man exclaimed, nodding towards the passes Naruto was holding. It was all a part of the deal I made with the owner of the resort when I was setting up shop years ago. Hey, you'd be surprised at how many people I know in this village. Old pals, every single shop owner in the district. You know how it goes. So there are no strings attached. Naruto reaffirmed. Ichiraku waved at him, still smiling casually. No catches. No strings attached. Nothing more. Just eat up and have a nice day. This is awesome, Naruto exclaimed, spinning around on the spot while gripping the tickets in his hands firmly, as if he was holding the most priceless artifact in the world. I've never won a contest like this before. And to think I won it because I eat ramen 4 to 7 times a day, for every day of the week. Hey, things like this happen, kid, Ichiraku exclaimed, straightening himself and going on with his work at the front chopping desk. With another steaming bowl prepped and ready, the owner of the stand brought it over and replaced Naruto's empty serving with a whole new batch. If you're passionate about something, then something spectacular will occur. It's like tending to a pot with a newly planted seed. It might take time, but that seed will eventually grow and blossom into a beautiful flower. I've heard that saying before, Naruto exclaimed, picking up his chopsticks and pulling the bowl of the alluring, steaming contents towards him. It's just weird hearing it coming from a guy who doesn't have overgrown eyebrows. The Jonin glanced up with an odd look on his face, remembering those various, random lectures about the power of youth he received from Rock Lee concerning his training to become a powerful shinobi. He swore, if he had to endure as much as one more of those lectures from his Chunin friend, he was going to end up looking like him by the time he reached 60. Still, it's a sensible quote, and you used it at the right time too. I believe I've made my point well, kid. Ichiraku chuckled. Much appreciated. You're welcome, the young adult replied, slurping down a whole length of noodles and vegetables. Licking his lips, the spiky-haired shinobi pointed his chopsticks in the owner's direction. And how many times have I told you to stop calling me kid? I'm not 12 years old anymore. Hey, when you reach my age, you're more than likely to be calling a man as old as Kakashi a kid, Ichiraku replied. How old is he anyway? Naruto asked, scratching his head with the same hand he held his chopsticks. His expression twisted into one of intense thought and puzzlement. I swear, you can never tell behind that mask he constantly wears. I'd tell ya if I knew how old he was, kid, just to save you the trouble, Ichiraku said, chopping up some choy sum while shaking his head. But finding out how old your sensei is like trying to find out what he really looks like under that mask of his. That statement made Naruto stop instantly in mid-noodle intake, a glare forming on the young male's face as he glared up at the old man with several strands of noodles hanging out of his mouth. Oh sure, remind me of all the torment me and the others suffered, Naruto said, his tone set on negative, as he remembered all the efforts forced out of the members of Team 7 given all those years ago. That escapade made them more stressed than any A-ranked mission they received today. Don't forget, old man, you saw his face and I didn't. Touché, kid, Ichiraku laughed, hands held at his sides. After glaring at Ichiraku for a satisfactory amount of time, Naruto went back to his meal, slurping up whole masses of noodles, vegetables and meat, while continuously engaging in conversation with the owner of the bar. The next half an hour became one of the highlights for him of the day. But then, once that half hour had passed, Naruto had finished his bowls of ramen, and was now filled up for the rest of the day until dinner. Standing up, he paid for his meal, thanking the owner for a well-made lunch and waving to Ayame goodbye. He then headed off, ready to spend the rest of his day at the resort. But as Naruto began walking down the street, a new problem suddenly emerged. Placing his thumb and finger on his chin, the boy's thoughts started to wander. Who should I bring to the hot springs with me? He thought, his mind pulling into overdrive to solve the problem. Ba-chan is busy today, and Ero Senin is out of town for the next couple of weeks, so that just leaves, HRN, immediately, a dozen or so faces started popping up in his head, threatening to overspill. It was then, after a few seconds of walking on in deep thought, Naruto suddenly got an idea, with the animated light bulb flashing above his head. He clicked his fingers in sound success. I'll just ask around. Hey, Sasuke. Uteme, open the goddamn door. Naruto shouted, bagging with his fist on the red obstruction, which was clearly the entrance to the Uchiha Estate's main building. It only briefly occurred to Naruto that this wasn't such a bad place. A traditional Japanese front yard garden with a nice white building is the main eyesore the moment you look through the wide open front gates, with a Chinese temple or shrine-like roof on top, and dark blue-gray painted wooden supports. If it wasn't devoid of life, this place would have been quite an alright place to spend at. Naruto could only imagine what it was like back in its days. Now all he got was this creepy feeling of a haunting whenever he looked upon the building. Above the peephole, on the door the yellow-haired Jonin was attempting to knock down with his racket. It read, Uchiha, and above that, a ripped piece of a scroll, stuck on with blue tack was, Sasuke. Naruto scowled at it, fists on his hips and his foot tapping impatiently. He should have put up a sign instead, Naruto thought. Warning, man too lazy to get up to answer the door. Long periods of waiting may be expected. Now he was swearing in his head. Banging on the door again, the young adult this time thought up a different approach. Grinning, Naruto cupped his hands over his mouth and shouted at the door at the top of his lungs, Sasuke-kun. Please let me in. I know that you're avoiding me because you're seeing another guy, but that's no excuse to cut your friends out of your life. Naruto yelled, still grinning wildly. Man, if this doesn't get him up, then I'm going to have to find another hobby. I know that you and your boyfriend are in there making out. But that's just fine. I can come back tomorrow, if you're not screwing the daylights out of him. As Naruto continued to shout at the door, he failed to notice the amount of people walking by the Uchiha estate stop at the entrance and take a quick look at what was going on. Even the old couple in the house across the street was listening in from their second-story window. Getting the desired reaction from the public, Naruto pressed on. That's it, making out or not, I'm coming in there. By the count of 3, I'm breaking down the door. Naruto cleared his throat, dropping into a stance and getting ready to kick. 1, 2, thr. Suddenly, the door swung open, and out stepped a very pissed off Uchiha, hair wet, water dripping down his steaming body, and his hand barely holding up the towel wrapped around his waist. What the do you want, idiot? Sasuke growled. Man, if his eyes had the 3 tomos spinning around the pupil at that moment, then Naruto may have mistaken his friend for using the Sharingan prematurely. Smiling, Naruto resumed his regular standing position and waved at his dripping friend. Hey there, Sasuke, Naruto exclaimed, acting as if the whole yelling at the door thing never happened. What's up? Well, as you can see, Sasuke began, his voice held as calm as possible, at the same time, reaching up with his free hand and brushing some of the soaking wet locks of hair out of his face. I was right in the middle of having a nice, warm shower, when you unexpectedly came up to my door and tried to knock it down, at the same time shouting profanity and false assumptions about me being it. Now, if you don't mind me repeating my earlier question, what the do you want? Sasuke yelled the last part, spit flying from his mouth and the winds from his yell causing Naruto to lean back a bit. Taking that as if Sasuke had yelled at him countless times before, which he did, Naruto just shrugged and continued. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out the 5 tickets he had received from Ichiraku and smiled at his friend, at the same time waving the passes in front of him. Well, earlier today, I won 5 gold class passes to the village's 5-star luxury hot spring resort downtown and, Naruto pulled them back, pocketing them. I was just wondering if my best friend would be interested in joining me to the massage parlors, saunas and spas, free of charge. So, Naruto glanced back at Sasuke, who was now staring at him in mild shock. What do you say? You want to come with? Blinking, Sasuke leaned over and pointed at Naruto, eyes still widened like saucers. Where? How did you get those passes? The Uchiha asked, unable to believe that his best friend was able to get a hold of such exclusive admissions passes to the most classiest of hot springs in the village. That's not important, Naruto said, turning to Sasuke with his arms folded and an obviously proud smile on his face. What's important is whether you want to come to the spas or not. Come on, Sasuke. It'll be fun. Wow, Naruto, as much as I would love to, Sasuke began, rubbing the back of his head in disappointment. I can't. The yellow-haired Jonin was immediately taken aback by Sasuke's words, his form slumping anime style and his expression shifting into disbelief. Now it was his turn to hold an expression of shock and despair. What? The spiky-haired, loud-mouthed screamed. Why? Well, you see, Sasuke looked around, to see if anybody was listening. Seeing that the people at the gate were gone, he nodded and leaned in, whispering into his friend's ear. I'm also right in the middle of re-establishing the clan. Huh? Naruto blinked, obviously not getting it. What do you mean by that, Sasu? It was then his mind finally clicked and the young male got a devilish grin on his face. He leaned forward, giving Sasuke his devilish look, one the Uchiha was all too familiar with. Who's the lucky girl, Tem? Well, nobody you would know, Naruto, Sasuke replied, nervous beads of sweat dripping down the sides of his head. Though the spiky-haired boy mistook them for water droplets, Naruto did not mistake Sasuke's reply for one of nervousness. He was obviously rather uncomfortable about the situation, which made the spiky-haired Jonin grin, thinking about how he was going to tease him for this later on in the future. Gulping at the expression Naruto was using, Sasuke was about to say something else when a voice suddenly came in from inside. Sasuke-kun, come back to bed. I'm ready. It was obviously a girl's voice, and Naruto got the distinct feeling that he knew who it was. Sasuke turned around, shouting back into the house with a romanticized attempted tone of voice. Coming, Kitty-kun. The Uchiha looked back, seeing Naruto blinking at him in surprise. It was then the boy's face suddenly scrunched up, suppressing his laughter in a futile attempt for a few seconds, before letting it all out in a bawl. Kitty-kun. Naruto laughed, holding his sides, and grinning up at Sasuke with tears in his eyes. Is that her pet name? What's yours? Ducky-kun. Who is she, Sasuke? Is it that lucky lady from Sound? Sorry, Naruto, Sasuke said, stepping back inside and slowly starting to close the doors. I have to go. You know what it's like. Don't want to keep the young lady waiting. Come on. At least tell me who she is. Without getting an answer, the door was closed right on Naruto, leaving the young adult staring at the red paint, which was the only obstacle standing between him and the inside of the Uchiha state. Huffing, the spiky-haired Jonin then turned on his heel and marched himself off of Sasuke's property, stopping just outside the estate's gates and glaring back at the main building. Oh well, I guess he is kind of busy, Naruto said. He breathed in through his nose roughly and let it out in a sigh, shaking his head. It was then when he felt the distinct texture and tickling on his nose that was all too familiar to him. He looked back with a raised eyebrow. Did I just smell candles and cologne? Sometime later. Come on, Shikamaru. Naruto groaned, looking up at the brown-haired Chunin staring back down at him with his hands in his pockets and that usual, stoic expression etched out on his face. It's just for one day. What else have you got on today that's more important, huh? I don't know, Shikamaru said, shrugging. Shogi. You play shogi like, every day. And on top of that, nothing. Naruto yelled, throwing his arms out. He had just about had it with all this yelling and begging. If Shikamaru refused this opportunity, he was thinking about tying up his next invitation choice and dragging him or her to the spa whether he or she liked it or not. There's a limit to how lazy you can be. Please, Shikamaru, I have to at least have one person to come along with me. I don't want to be considered a loner all my life. Meh, Shikamaru shrugged, still leaning against the doorframe of his plain and basic home, and staring down the steps at his friend, who was in the midst of despair. Have you tried asking Sasuke? Sasuke. I already told you. I just went to see him at his place. Naruto screamed, pointing down the street in the direction of the Uchiha estate. I asked him whether or not he wanted to come, but no. He's too busy getting by some girl, I have no idea who, just, don't ask. Whatever the case, he won't come, and now I'm here, asking you whether you're available. And all you have to say is, sorry Naruto, I can't come, because I'm too busy doing nothing, and jacking off at shogi. What the? Look Naruto, Shikamaru said with a sigh, looking around the street to see if anybody was looking. Lucky enough for him, the streets were empty. So after making his checks, the Chunin glanced back down at his friend and continued. I'm sorry, but I've got other things to do this afternoon. Hokage-sama needs me to run another errand with Tamari again to Sunagaker, and I'm already stocked up with clearing up my house. Why don't you go see Neji? Neji. He's taken his genin squad on a mission to Wave Country. Ba-chan said something about helping the farmers deliver their supplies to the local markets. Wait. Neji's got a squad of his own now. Yeah. Didn't you know? Naruto asked. Upon looking at the Chunin's intent gaze, the yellow-haired Jonin stared at him blankly. My god, you are dense. Alright, fine, what about Choji? Surely he's free. He's on a mission with Sai, Lee and Guy to the Land of Lightning. I don't know what's going on there, but I know for certain the walk would be good exercise for all of them, Naruto said, frowning as he remembered the terrain from his last mission into the country. He was dead on his feet for a week the moment he got back to Konohagakure. Shikamaru was apparently aware of the terrain himself. Well, then keep asking around. I'm sure a couple of your friends would be available to go out with you today. Most of the missions are taken up by genin, and there are no evil cults or organizations popping up that I'm aware of that are going to be a threat to Konoha, Shikamaru said, shrugging. He stepped into the building, reaching for the door. You may want to consider asking one of the senseis as well. See ya around Naruto. Yeah. See ya Shikamaru, Naruto replied. The yellow-haired Jonin walked off the moment Shikamaru closed the door on him. Heading down the footpath, Naruto then turned into the road leading down the street and began heading off in the direction of his next destination. All the while, his mind was awhirl with people who he could possibly ask out. However, as the images of these people came into mind, they slowly began fading away, along with his hopes. Accompanying these thoughts were old feelings of neglect, loneliness and hurt, emotions and feelings he hadn't felt since he was 8. I hope that at least someone has the time to join me at the resort. I don't want to go all on my own. Shrugging, the young male sighed of his depression and decided to head to Kiba's place, to see whether he was available. When he arrived there 10 minutes later, he found himself knocking on the front door of a regular 2-story building with a balcony and everything, even though it did look a little bit run down. Naruto didn't have to wait long, but when Kiba opened the door, the yellow-haired Jonin wished he didn't. Naruto, our ya dude. The brown-haired Chunin exclaimed through blocked sinuses and saggy eyes. Cringing, the young, spiky-haired shinobi let out a loud, disgusted groan at the sight before him. Kiba looked horrible, more so than he usually did on a casual, bright and sunny day. Obviously, the dog-style fighting ninja had come down with a terrible cold, and was spending all day and night inside, locked up in the cold, dark, dog-smelling hell-hole he called home. Naruto thought this, mostly for a fact that he had been inside his friend's house, and believe it, it was an awful sight. It looked as though a tornado had just been through the place, maybe even worse. Naruto figured it was not good for Kiba's condition. With a bed sheet wrapped around him and a box of tissues hand, the brown-haired Chunin was doing his best to keep himself up, at the same time shielding his eyes from the bright sunlight. Being indoors didn't really brighten his day at all. Hey, Kiba, I'm doing alright, I guess. Naruto cleared his throat, pardoning himself for his inappropriate response to first laying eyes on Kiba in a week. Oh, how are you doing? The spiky-haired Jonin asked. Oh, yeah no, so, Kiba replied, grinning. Some mucus ran down from his nose, but Kiba sniffed it back in. Naruto cringed, feeling his stomach turn with the urge to chuck up the ramen he had half an hour ago. But he held it in and just smiled back at the sick young male, trying to keep his composure up. Any you way, woo's up. Is there, nothing you want to tell me? Huh, oh yeah, actually, Naruto began, rubbing the back of his head while looking down in thought. Deciding he'd just go ahead and asked, the boy smiled and looked up at his friend. I was wondering if you were, available this afternoon to go down to the hot spring resort downtown. The really flashy place for VIPs only. You see, I won 5 passes to go to the place for the day and, well, I figured that since I had 4 to spare, came here to see if you wanted to come. Kiba smiled, but cringed when a splitting wave of head pains hit him. He groaned and stepped back into the shadows a bit, almost stumbling in his efforts to block out the sun. Naruto, Atsuri, gind of you, but, Kiba replied, a frown forming on his face. You can see, I'm, very sick. Oh geez, olds are you worse tune. Human, olds, so, I'm, very sorry dude, and make it today. Naruto frowned a bit in disappointment. However, he figured since Kiba had a good excuse for not coming, he couldn't blame him. The boy would probably scare the staff away in his state, even if he could walk all that way to the spas. So, the spiky-haired Jonin just smiled and nodded in understanding. That's okay, Kiba, Naruto exclaimed, shrugging. Guess I'm going to have to find someone else to come with me. Kiba blew his nose on one of his tissues and tossed it into his house, sniffing. Ow. About. Of the IRLS. What? Naruto asked. Sorry Kiba, I didn't catch that. Ever mind. Kiba waved at him. You'll figure it out, enough. I'll get outta air before you catch ma, old too. Oh, sure thing, Kiba, see ya. Naruto waved, stepping back down and waving at the sick shinobi. Hope you get better soon, dude. Thanks, for dropping by. The brown-haired boy managed to utter out, waving back before disappearing back into his house. Wow, Naruto, that's quite the interesting story, so far, Kakashi exclaimed in amusement, leaning against the wall in front of Naruto and looking at him with his usual unseen expression. With his arms folded over his chest, the silver-haired Jonin took his fellow ninja's explanation seriously, and even though Naruto was at equals with him in terms of rank, but not really in terms of strength, Kakashi was now treating him as if he were a full-grown adult. Naruto sighed, rubbing the back of his head. So Kakashi, since Sasuke, Shikamaru or Kiba can't come to the resort, I was wondering that maybe, you'll be able to, join me. The spiky-haired ninja asked, his voice laced with both a pleading and hopeful tone. Unfortunately, the young male was met with a shake of the head and a sigh from his former sensei. Sorry, Naruto, but as you can see, I'm currently waiting in line to see the next movie of Ika Ika Paradise. The silver-haired copy ninja replied with much enthusiasm, gesturing Naruto's attention to the long line he was standing in, and also pointing out the theater's barrier set up between him and Naruto. Looking along the line, both of them could see over 100 of Konoha's villagers lined up in twos, chattering eagerly and excitedly about the blockbuster motion picture they're about to watch. Kakashi grinned, this easily being seen underneath his mask. It's going to be great. This movie is supposed to have both the main character, and the girl he tries so hard to get to like him from the last film, accidentally bumping into each other at some spa, which ends up in them having some fun behind steam room doors. The story later unfolds into an amazing adventure quest, involving more girls and love scenes. Kakashi sniffed, whipping a fake tear away from his eye. It's simply a work of art. Okay. I'm not sure how to say this to you, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto said, staring at his teacher with a look that simply said, I'll never be able to look at you the same way ever again. But, Ero Sennin has got you hooked onto some really sick shit. Hey, come on, Naruto. Kakashi exclaimed in his usual laid-back tone, shrugging at the boy. Sometimes, you've just got to appreciate some of the things life gives you. Like Ika Ika, for instance. It employs both fantastic language and English skills, and an excellent story you can easily grow to love and respect from the author. Not to mention the movie is based on the best-selling Make Out Paradise series. Naruto just stared at him, sweat drops forming on the back of his head. You should come in and watch it with us, Naruto, Kakashi exclaimed. I promise you, it'll be worth it. I think I'll pass, thanks anyway Kakashi-sensei, the boy replied, waving at him. Kakashi shrugged. Suit yourself. Hey there, Kakashi-kun. A familiar voice suddenly spoke up from behind the disappointed Naruto. In a blink of an eye, the silver-haired Jonin, who had once been leaning against the wall patiently, was now joined by three more familiar faces. One of them, a familiar purple-haired proctor from years back, and two very deeply involved lovebirds that didn't want their relationship to get out, until now that is. Thanks for saving our places. What the? Naruto shouted, his mind vibrating from shock as he watched Kakashi put his arm around the elite Jonin Anko, and joined in by Asuma and Kurenai. Shaking his head and rubbing his eyes to see if he wasn't tripping, it turned out that his brain wasn't playing tricks on him, and what he saw rocked him and the Kyuubi, who had once been asleep and was now looking through Naruto's sights to see what the trouble was. You and Anko. Together. No way. They both shouted at the same time. Well, if it isn't my favorite, spiky-haired Gaki. Anko exclaimed, winking at the young male, who paled at the sight of her. How have you been, lover boy? Fine, Naruto replied, shaking in his boots. He knew all too well how terrifying Anko could be. Next to Tsunade and Sakura, she could make the horror train fun ride look like a swan ride through Heartland. Now, Anko-chan, Kakashi exclaimed, holding her a little bit closer. Let's not try to scare him, okay? Besides, he's no longer a Chunin anymore, he's a Jonin now. An elite Jonin, I might add, Asuma added, earning a nod of agreement from Kurenai. Who's very well on his way to becoming Hokage, the red-eyed Kunoichi exclaimed, smiling at the young man on the other side of the barrier. Naruto was, at this very moment, hunched over anime style, with a very disturbed look etched out on his face. Kurenai, however, thought nothing of it, and neither did the other dating Jonins. He's gotten much stronger since the academy, and I bet he's getting all the girls now. I'd be surprised if he wasn't, Anko said, raising an eyebrow and looking the young man over from head to foot. There wasn't much change in his outfit, despite the fact he now wore his jacket open, showing off that well-toned chest and abs of his, a white, long scarf around his neck, with his headband with much longer straps that reached down his back. What mostly changed was his appearance. He was definitely same height as Sasuke and Kakashi, and he had a manlier figure. His muscles were well shaped and toned out, fitting his form and appearance very well, which Anko and Kurenai could most definitely tell, yet his hair hadn't changed a bit. Also, his facial appearance hadn't changed much in the past couple of years either, but he was definitely much more handsome, with those cute whiskers beginning to fit more into his face now that he was becoming to look just like his father before him. Naruto, seeing his old teachers looking over him, blushed in embarrassment and rubbed the back of his head, while grinning up at the two happy couples. He mostly focused his attention on Kakashi, since he had no idea he was dating his Chunin proctor. So Kakashi-sensei, how long have you two been going out? Naruto asked curiously, wanting to get more dirty on what the pair have been doing. He hoped to God neither of them explained it to him as something like what Sasuke was possibly doing with his mystery girl. Kakashi and Anko blinked at him, looking at each other for a moment or so before sharing a smile with each other. They then looked back and grinned at the yellow-haired shinobi. We've been going out for quite a while now, Naruto, Kakashi stated. Yeah, for several months actually. Anko held up her hand, showing Naruto a golden band fitted nicely around her ring finger. It sparkled in the sun, flashing in Naruto's eyes. We're getting married, they both exclaimed. At that moment, Naruto passed out, falling flat onto his back in the middle of the road. Kakashi, Anko, Kurenai and Asuma looked down at the unconscious young male, seeing his foot twitch where he lay, almost lifeless. For several seconds, the group, along with many members of the crowd, just gazed down at the unconscious ninja, completely shocked and amused. Kakashi then suddenly chuckled, rubbing the back of his head nervously, whereas Anko laughed. Asuma shared a similar reaction to Kakashi, and Kurenai giggled uncontrollably with shaking shoulders. You know, Anko, I think you might have killed him. Kurenai exclaimed, looking over at the purple-haired girl she was referring to. Anko nodded, also rubbing her head like her fiancé. Yeah, I guess so. Man, I'm good. About 15 minutes later, Naruto eventually recovered from his slip into sudden unconsciousness for reasons he still found shocking and disturbing even though it was just a memory. Saying goodbye and congratulations to Kakashi and Anko, and Asuma and Kurenai, the yellow-haired Jonin then headed for the next house outlined in his mind. It didn't take him too long to get to it. It was only a 5-minute walk from the cinemas through some back alley shortcuts and streets. After a short trek, he arrived at another small estate, this one belonging to the Aburame family. Entering through the gate entrance, Naruto headed down the path, careful not to tread on anything small, since he was aware of the family's love for insects. The family's garden was really well kept though, lots of rose bushes, bamboo shoots and blossom trees planted here and there. It sort of reminded him of the Uchiha estate, only this garden was much more extravagant, or like the Namikaze estate, remembering the time he snuck into it one time years back, only this garden had less blossom trees. When he passed by one of the small trees of the small collection lining the footpath leading to the front door of the main building, Naruto could have sworn he saw it moving. Taking a closer look, he saw that it was covered with stick insects and pink leaf insects disguised as the petals of the blossom tree. In fact, all the trees, leaves lining the path were made up of the same kind of insects. Startled at this realization, Naruto continued on regardless, and when he reached the door, knocked on it. Receiving no reply yet, the yellow-haired shinobi then spotted the doorbell, and decided to ring it. When he did, he immediately heard movement behind the door, and the approach of someone's footsteps beyond it. The moment he heard this, Naruto suddenly got the distinct feeling that something was crawling up his legs. When he looked down, he was nearly scared out of his own skin when he saw masses of beetles and cockroaches crawling out from underneath the door, followed by a couple of giant centipedes and rhinoceros beetles. Naruto shivered, and gently kicked the bugs off his feet one after another. At that moment, the door opened and Naruto straightened up. When the door swung open, it revealed a casually dressed Shino, wearing a white vest, zipped up, with a high collar, his regular sunglasses, and black, baggy shorts. Crawling up and down his legs were several beetles, along with a couple of butterflies rested on his shoulder. The moment he saw Naruto, the bug-addicted shinobi, though as stoic as he was, smiled a small smile underneath his mask and tipped his head to his visitor. Hey there, Shino, Naruto exclaimed, smiling while waving to the seemingly emotionless boy. Why, good afternoon Naruto, Shino replied in a monotone voice, though the spiky-haired Jonin could clearly detect a hint of silent delight in the fellow Jonin's greeting. What brings you here? Well, you see, I won 5 free passes to Konoha's spa resort downtown, and, well, I was wondering if you would like to go as well. You know, just for a rest and relaxation or something, Naruto said, not wanting to get too deep into his explanations about the place. He had given up all hope on his friends accepting his invites, so he was now reduced to just shooting fish in the barrel, trying out his luck. He shrugged. If you're not busy or anything, I'd really appreciate it if you joined me. Shino murmured, scratching the side of his face with his finger. For several seconds of silence, the brown-haired male thought, obviously taking Naruto's invite into serious consideration. This was to be the closest Naruto came to having one of the boys accept an invite from him to go to the spa, but just like Shikamaru and Sasuke before, he was once again disappointed at the answer. Shino glanced up at his fellow Jonin and said with a sigh, "Sorry Naruto, but, my body doesn't exactly cope well with extremely hot temperatures involving condensation, or too much water for that matter." His tone was laced with seriousness and disappointment. Not only was Naruto a little bit let down, but he was also remotely surprised. What? Really? How come? The spiky-haired shinobi asked in curiosity. Shino sighed, looking down at his feet, as if addressing the bugs crawling all around them. Well, all the bugs that inhabit my body for my style of jutsu are, to put it in simple terms, not water types. They're extremely sensitive to it, Shino explained. As a result, water weakens my form. But even though it's only temporarily, long-term exposure to it can still be harmful to my bugs. They feast on chakra, and not on any other substance. My deepest apologies Naruto, I cannot come. Oh, well, I see what you mean, Shino, Naruto replied, lowering his head. Sighing in disbelief, the young male then looked back up and smiled. I was just wondering if it was possible, if you could. Sorry about that, Shino said, stiffly shuffling on the spot uncomfortably. I've also got to prepare dinner for tonight. We've got over 1 million mouths to feed, That's fine, Shino. It's okay. Naruto sighed, turning on his heel and waving to the bug lover, departing before he overstayed his welcome. I gotta go. See you around. See you, Naruto. Thanks for stopping by. Yeah, adios. As Shino disappeared back into his home and Naruto vacated the property, the boy stopped and stared down at the dirt road at his feet. Disappointed, he kicked at a stone lying at his feet and let out a breath of air. Boy, he felt horrible. Everyone's doing something today, even Shino. Of all people, Naruto thought, looking up and beginning to walk down the street. It was around 1 o'clock, so he had plenty of time to go keep asking around. But who else was there? Most of the people he was considering are either too busy or were incapable of enduring a single afternoon in a hot tub. While Naruto was most eager for a good relaxing bathe, he was still having problems inviting people. He hit himself in the forehead, bruising his palm on his headband. What am I doing wrong? But then, another realization kicked in. At first he thought a distant voice of Kami or someone was trying to hint it to him, or it was just the after effects of the ramen lunch he just had. As it turns out, it was just Kiba's sick voice echoing on in his mind, the one person who had enough brain on that day to suggest it to him. Finally, after about 45 minutes of walking around stupidly, trying to invite his friends, Naruto remembered the one group of people he had forgotten. He clicked his fingers in success, a grin widening on his lips. The girls. Of course. After that brief moment of triumph, the boy slapped himself in the face and pulled his hand down it in distress. Man, I'm such an idiot. How can I forget? It was in a boy's nature to ask their mates out for some time together, and would most often consider the girls later, either because the guys were too shy to ask, or didn't want to bother the girls. Since the boys were all busy, Naruto figured he would ask Sakura, Ino, Hinata and Tenten if they were available. He knew that if he asked any of his fellow kunoichi, he was certain that they would accept his offer. Unlike most of the guys, the girls loved massage parlors and spas, as well as quiet nights out. It was practically the dream date, and Naruto realized that he could utilize this opportunity to finally settle a stronger relationship with the girls and get to know them a little better. However, the prosperity that was held in the highest for him when asking the girls out and what might occur between them still remained distant from him. His mind just settled on that one, straight track. He brought his hand to his chin and rubbed it with his thumb and forefinger in thought. With his brow furrowing, Naruto was sent into a deep sea of thought. Will they accept? I mean, me and the girls really don't have much of that hanging around theme between us, let alone a really good history together, Naruto thought, remembering all those times he had spent with his familiar friends. Sakura used to always pummel him for one reason or another, but she rarely or never did that these days. Though her screaming used to be deafening, and her rare attacks were vicious, she had cooled down in those actions towards him over the past couple of years. In fact, she and Sakura seemed to have taken up that really friendly attitude towards him, sort of like Hinata. The Hyuga, of course, had changed very little, though her confidence in fighting had increased dramatically over the past few years, as well as her fighting skills, and Tenten has definitely gotten stronger, and has developed more skill with a kunai blade. Figuring he could take his chances with his odds, Naruto grinned and nodded to himself. I'll give it a shot. Naruto now had a new list to choose from, to see who would accompany him for a night out at the hot spring resort. Although he had considered them at first, he had become so wrapped up in asking the guys out, as well as his senseis that note that he had left in the back of his mind had been all but forgotten. But now that he had been able to fish it out, he was ready for another round. The gloves were off, and it was high time he gave one big one to his opponent of denial, which he was certain to beat this time. It would be tough asking any of the girls out, a lot tougher than when he was going around the village asking the boys, but he was certain his nads could take the punishment. First stop was Sakura, the girl of his dreams and the inspiration of both his determination and strength. Over the past few years since his return to Konoha from training with Jiraiya, Naruto had seen how much Sakura had grown, inside and out. Although her womanly appearance and magnificent beauty hadn't changed a bit in his eyes since the day they first formed Team 7, the spiky-haired Jonin could still fully make out her entire potential as a whole. Her strength and skill as an exceptional shinobi, as well as a medical ninja, have made her the best kunoichi and field medic nin in the village next to Tsunade. Furthermore, he had reason to believe that his attraction towards her has increased tenfold as well. But it didn't matter how much he liked her, in this situation, it only mattered how much she liked him. Around this time, Sakura was finishing up her duties in the hospital. The pink-haired kunoichi was just patching up the last of the wounds on her final patient for the day, before signing off and heading on home for some dinner. Presently, she was right in the middle of treating a very bruised-up Konohamaru, the brown-haired Chunin having seriously injured himself due to, Kami knows what. Seeing the apparent seriousness of the wounds, Sakura looked the young teenager in the eye and decided to ask him about it. Hold still, Konohamaru, the pink-haired Jonin fussed, holding him by his cheeks as she dabbed his black eye with alcohol to disinfect it. She sighed and shook her head, seeing the boy bite tooth and nail to stop himself from shouting out in agony. He apparently wanted to appear tough in front of the fabulous kunoichi, in a teen's foolish attempt to impress her. How did you get so bruised up anyway? Arg. Quit moving around, would you? Do you want to get swabbed in the eye? Yeesh. Well, I'll have you know, Sakura-chan. Konohamaru began, clearing his throat with a fake cough. His childishness has failed to disperse as of yet, as well as his naive arrogance. I single-handedly battled off a squad of about 60 rogue ninja. You should have been there. You would have dug it the most. It was incredible, the teen exclaimed, beginning to tell his tall tale to the rather amused Sakura. My team and I were heading back to Konoha from a long mission in Wave Country, just helping some old lady set up shop. We were just walking along casually, minding our own business, when we were suddenly ambushed by the horde of bandits. Moegi was like, "Oh no. Somebody save me." And Udon was like, "What are we going to do, Konohamaru?" So I was like, "I'll save us." So I took 'em all on. The boy declared, moving his hands around in an attempt to visually describe the situation. He nearly caused Sakura to jab him in the eye with the swabbing stick. After taking them out, the leader of the rogue ninja was then like, "Whoa, this guy is like too badass man." Then all of a sudden, 80 Akatsuki show up. I took out about 67 of them. But then 20 of them finally flanked me, so I was like, "You know what, guys? I'm not going to give you the pleasure." So I grabbed my teammates and ran for it. But then when we finally got away, I thought to myself, hold on, maybe I should have left them a party favor. Oh, I did. A kunai bomb. Right up their asses. Ba boom. Konohamaru threw his arms out, bouncing on the patient bed he was sitting on, causing Sakura to back off a little at his excessive enthusiasm. Sakura raised an eyebrow at the boy, thoroughly amused by his little story. "Well, isn't that something?" "Yup," Konohamaru exclaimed. "They should just go ahead and make me a Jonin for that, or maybe even Hokage. I'm sure that after this mission, they would definitely make you Hokage," Sakura stated, trying to act as though she believed his story. In fact, his story was so far-fetched, she felt like punching him through the nearest wall. But she restrained herself from doing so, knowing that hitting him with an easy punch would probably kill the Chunin. As Konohamaru folded his arms, grinning proudly, the two of them suddenly heard a series of slow claps coming from the entrance to this room, and glanced around to see a very amused-looking Naruto leaning against the doorframe to the check-up room. Shaking his head, the boy clapped a couple more times before folding his own arms. "Congratulations, Konohamaru," Naruto began. "You've once again impressed us all with your, clears throat, heroism." "Yeah," Konohamaru exclaimed, leaping off of the bed once Sakura had finished applying the pad and patch to the cut and bruise above his eye. Fixing his pants, the boy fastened his scarf around his neck and placed his left hand on his hip. In a full-blown cool display, the boy checked his right hand and nails and rubbed it against his chest, polishing them. "'Cause I was like, a badass," he sniffed, running his finger across the crevice under his nose before turning around and breathing in deeply. It was then he folded his arms over his stomach and hunched over, suppressed sobs suddenly starting to rattle off of his shaking body. Naruto and Sakura stared at the boy as he stood there, back turned to them, and was bawling his eyes out. After about a moment or so, the yellow-haired Jonin shook his head and smirked up at his disturbed and crying friend. He had known the boy for a long time, and putting up such a laid-back display was definitely a trait of his. "Stop crying, Konohamaru." "Huh." Konohamaru straightened up immediately and turned around, brushing the ridge under his nose again, sniffing and easily composing himself. He grinned and clicked at Naruto, obviously putting up that fake mask again. "That's funny, Naruto-nichan." He then flexed his biceps, tightening one of the bandages and sending a wave of pain through his arm. He cringed, but still managed to hold out under the pain. "Next time, I will do much better to impress you." "Sure thing, little man," Naruto exclaimed, before thumbing him out of the room. "Now get out of here." I have to talk to Sakura-chan. Okay. See y'all later, you guys. Konohamaru exclaimed, skipping out of the room. As soon as he had Naruto and Sakura out of sight, he instead began limping away, the skipping becoming too much stress on his sore leg. Meanwhile, the spiky-haired Jonin standing by the door just shook his head in amusement, and turned towards his favorite Kunoichi, who was also standing and putting away her equipment. That Konohamaru, Naruto began, always getting into some kind of trouble. Yeah, I don't know why he would go so far as to lie to us like that, Sakura replied, closing up her medical kit and picking it up off of the bed. Naruto gently took it from her, putting it up onto the high shelf as to save her the trouble. Though flattered by his gentleman-like gesture, the pink-haired Jonin just folded her arms and gave the boy an admirable smirk. Do you know what actually happened on that mission? Of course I do, Naruto exclaimed, turning back to the girl once he had pushed the box into place. He placed his hands on his hips. I'm the one that double-checks his team's mission reports to see what they had been up to. Apparently, he was startled by a swooping crow when he and his team walked by its nest, and he fell into a ditch on the opposite side of the track. I would have asked how many times, but Ba-chan had crossed out that number from the record as a request from Moegi. Sakura giggled, imaging the scene as if she were there herself. Now that's embarrassing. Yeah, Naruto replied, placing his hands in his pockets. You can easily tell why he'd lie about so many of his missions. According to my memories, you were lying and telling tales just like Konohamaru at his age. Sakura exclaimed, placing her hands on her hips and looking at the handsome Jonin standing before her. Always telling fibs to us to cover up your ass. And I must say what a find that is, inner Sakura exclaimed, seeing through the same eyes her physical self was looking through. Over the past couple of years, since Naruto had brought Sasuke back to Konoha, Sakura had developed an undeniable sparkling admiration for her fellow, knuckle-headed teammate. Not that she hadn't admired him greatly before in their younger years, she just didn't express it as much back then when they were 12. But now, her powerful, hidden attraction to the yellow-haired Jonin was beginning to show through her frequent erotic dreams, and dirty daylight thoughts. However, her inner decency continued to put up a good fight against her lustful urges. Inner Sakura, however, had something else to say about her attitude and actions towards the elite Jonin. The cool, alternate personality of Sakura revealed to her host her incredible attraction to Naruto in various mental outbursts, and simulated, erotic images. It annoyed Sakura, but she was progressively beginning to succumb to them. Shaking her head from inner Sakura's latest outburst, the conscious Sakura blinked in shock and bewilderment, wondering what the hell had just come over her. Man, what the heck was that thought? What? I so did not lie like that. Naruto shouted in protest, folding his arms in a childish manner. He leant back against Sakura's desk, getting comfortable in his exchange of statements with the young Kunoichi. Sure, I sort of exaggerated my tales a bit, but most of my stories were true. Sure they were, Sakura replied, rolling her eyes. She also leant against a piece of furniture, the bed across from her, and looked at Naruto with disbelief. Like that time when you came up against Zetsu. You told me that that guy summoned a giant Venus fly trap, and when it swallowed you whole, you used a kunai bomb to get yourself out. Then you defeated him by hitting him with a Rasengan. Yeah, what was wrong with that story? What was wrong with it? You were scared out of your mind when you came up against him. In fact, you were so scared, that it took a punch from me, and a flight made by you across the whole valley to get you to come to your senses. Sakura said, throwing her arms out theatrically. That's what happened. After that you chased him down and disintegrated him using your Rasengan. Yeah, but don't forget, Sakura, I saved you. Naruto stated, poking a finger in her direction. You got trapped when Zetsu manipulated a tree to crush you, and sucked Sai into the ground so that only his head was sticking out. Then, when you were about to get squashed by the Akatsuki Psycho, I hammered him with my Shuriken Rasengan. Sakura, blushing at the memory, turned away and huffed, arms folded. So you did, big deal. Big deal, Naruto repeated. What do you want anyway, Naruto? Sakura asked, rapidly changing the subject before he got too deep into it. She turned to her friend and love interest, giving him a considerate stare. You obviously came here for a reason. So what is it you want to tell me? Oh, well, Naruto started, rubbing the back of his head nervously while glancing at the floor. Finding the right words, the young adult looked up with a smile. You see, Sakura, earlier today I won 5 gold class passes from Ichiraku's ramen bar, allowing the winner and 4 friends to spend one day or night at the 5-star hot spring resort in Konoha's leisure district, downtown. They're VIP passes, where we get our own private spas, saunas and massages, and everything is free of charge for the time we spend there. So are you interested in coming? Sakura was staring at Naruto as if he had just shared with her the most important and most shocking information in the world, her eyes widened in surprise and her mouth agape. Shaking her head to get herself out of her daze, the pink-haired Kunoichi stepped forward, coming right up to Naruto's face and giving him a look of utter disbelief and excitement. Are you serious, Naruto? She shouted, her emerald eyes flashing with the prospect of 5-class luxury. You mean you won tickets to the most expensive, most popular and most relaxing spa house in the entire village? Get out of here. No, I'm not joking or anything, Naruto said, reaching into his jacket pocket. In fact, I've got the tickets right here. Look. The Jonin held up the 5 laminated passes, which immediately drew Sakura's attention to them. The girl gasped and snatched them from his hand, taking a much closer look. Naruto just smiled proudly and slipped his hands back into his pocket, while looking down at the pink-haired Kunoichi, seeing as that he was a head and quarter taller than her. These are real. Sakura gasped, reading one pass over, and checking it from back to front. I can't believe this. Naruto smiled and reached out, taking them back from her and holding them above his head. So, do you want to come? I'll understand if you don't want to, if you're busy or something. What? Sakura said loudly. You don't just dangle 5 limited edition passes to the most luxurious spa in the village in front of a girl's face and expect her to say no, do you? Is that a yes, then? Naruto asked, smirking. Yes, it is. The girl practically shouted, waving her arms in the air. I will go out with you, tonight. Catching on to this, Naruto smirked down at her, giving his teammate a very mischievous look as he watched her catch her breath from all her yelling. It only took her a few seconds to realize what she had said, and when she did, Sakura stepped back and pressed her trigger fingers together, looking away and blushing a bright pink. She smiled nervously, before stammering out an excuse for her without a second thought outburst. I mean, sure, I'll come to the spa with you. All right then, Naruto exclaimed, handing her one of the passes. Here you go, Sakura-chan. Thanks, Naruto-kun, Sakura replied, taking it. Meet me at the front of the spa resort at 6 o'clock this afternoon. You don't need to bring anything extra. Everything will be supplied for you there. Naruto stated. Okay. See you then, Naruto. Yeah. See ya, Sakura-chan. The Jonin replied, walking out of the room while waving to her. Sakura shyly waved back, still blushing brightly and clutching the ticket close to her as if it were her most precious possession. Once Naruto was out of sight, the girl shuffled around nervously where she stood, her mind awhirl with all the thoughts wildly concerning Naruto, and how she had accepted that invite from him. That was so sweet of him to ask me out, and to such a nice place too. Sakura said in her head. Now you're starting to warm up to him, after all these years, it's about time. Inner Sakura shouted, arms folded and a glare fixated on her face. I've rejected most of his offers asking me out before, but that was when we were much younger, and I liked Sasuke back then. Sakura exchanged, letting out a sigh. Now things are much different. He's much more mature, stronger, smarter, much wiser, and I must say, a lot than before. Inner Sakura said, drooling as she imagined the boy clad in boxers. Though she hadn't seen Naruto bare-skinned since he was 12, Sakura could only imagine what he must look now. The thoughts of what he must look like made the real Sakura drool, as the images of Naruto popped up in her mind. Can you imagine it? Kissing him would be orgasmic enough, but imagine getting down to the actual, Usha. Oh yeah, Sakura sighed, before realizing what she was agreeing to. Wait a second. That's just going way too far. Sure, I like Naruto now, but do I actually like him like that? How can you even argue that I do like him, the way you think? Firstly, I am you. Inner Sakura stated. Secondly, I can tell that you like him like that because you're seriously turned on right now. The conscious Sakura blushed a bright red, scratching her right cheek with her finger. The warm sensations coursing through your body, the way you get aroused by those erotic thoughts of you and him, the hunger in your eyes when you gaze at him, and the drooling, it all adds up. You want him. Hey, I guess you're right, Sakura replied, unable to argue with these facts about herself coming to light. But, I'm so confused, what am I supposed to do then? Well, tell him that you like him. Tell him that you think he's hot, and that you want to screw him senseless. Inner Sakura proclaimed, chuckling evilly while raising a painted fist. Then you can have with him in the spa. What? Hang on a sec, what if he invites Ino or anyone else along? Surely I don't want to do it with Naruto in front of them. Sakura shouted, completely flabbergasted at her own dirty mind. Come on. It's still the most perfect opportunity for the two of you. Inner Sakura exclaimed. Live a little. Just ignore the others and just do it. Besides, being watched makes it all the steamier. I'm still not sure about this, Sakura thought, blushing nervously and finding this suggestion rather embarrassing. However, she couldn't set aside the growing warmth between her legs, which caused her to squeeze her thighs tightly together. I mean, it'll be embarrassing. So, ask them to join in. Inner Sakura lustfully and shockingly replied. Alright, now that's just taking it too far. Sakura replied, shutting her overly stimulated persona out of her head. Still, to be with Naruto, that would be very nice, Sakura exclaimed. Okay. That's one down, 3 more to go. Naruto thought as he vacated the hospital, looking down at the 3 remaining tickets he wanted to give out. Scratching his chin in thought, the yellow-haired Jonin thought about the next person he wanted to invite. As he began walking down the dirt road through the various shops and boulevards, Naruto's mind then clicked onto the next person and he clenched his fist in success. Ino. Of course. She's just working in her flower shop today. She should be closing up right about now. I'll see if she's available. Grinning at the thought of having the one of the most beautiful kunoichi in Konoha along with him to the spa, Naruto set off for the Yamanaka's flower shop. It was only a few blocks away from the hospital, and knowing Konoha like the back of his hand from his pranking days, the Namikaze heir knew exactly where to go immediately. Setting his mapping skills on autopilot, he moved himself through the streets quickly, avoiding large crowds as much as possible. At the same time, he avoided engaging in conversation with many of his newly made fans, seeing as that his victories over Orochimaru, Sasuke, Pain and Madara have made him a very popular attraction in Konoha. Everyone had seemed to forget that he was the carrier of the Kyuubi. Rushing round another corner, Naruto grinned wildly at himself. Ino wouldn't say no to going out to the spas tonight. Since Sakura is also coming along, she'll definitely agree to it. At the same time, the spiky-haired shinobi tried to think about how he would be able to invite Hinata and Tenten. Perhaps the same approach he was considering of using on Ino as he had with Sakura, calm, smart and casual. What's there to be afraid of? After about 5 minutes, Naruto was now coming up on Ino's flower shop. Jogging down the street, the boy was eagerly about to make his entrance when he suddenly heard a loud crash, a shout of anger and a terrified scream. Stopping, Naruto's ears opened up to get a better fix on what was going on down in the flower store 2 shops down, blinking and utterly bewildered. A split second later, the store's glass shattered and a body went flying out. Rolling across the road outside, the man that was tossed through the window shakily got up, and with a terrified scream, began sprinting away. Naruto watched on in surprise as he saw Ino, dressed in her Anbu ninja attire that was an equivalent to her previous purple uniform, come running out of the store with a katana in hand and an obviously pissed-off look on her face. She growled angrily as she watched the terrified, would-be burglar run off. "Yeah, that's right. Run!" Ino screamed. "You'd better think twice before robbing any of these stores. You hear me?" Realizing that the man was going to get away, Naruto growled and rushed onto the road, getting a better fix on the man in his line of sights. Reaching into his ninja pouch, the boy drew 2 balls stuck together and, cranking his right arm back, tossed it forward, the twin metal orbs flying straight past Ino and aimed for the man's feet. Suddenly, right before it reached its target, the balls separated, but began spinning around on a central axis thanks to the nylon wire and rope holding them together. They spun and struck the man's legs, immediately snapping them together, tying up and causing him to fall forward, flat onto his face with a loud, oomph. Ino, surprised at what had happened, turned around to see Naruto walking towards her, hands in his pockets and a smirk on his face. He grinned at the surprised, blonde-haired Anbu captain. "I think it's just coincidence that I always show up on the scene at exactly the right time, don't you think so?" Naruto asked. "Boy, what a great way to start up conversation." Recognizing the spiky-haired Jonin, Ino smiled and sheathed the sword back into the scabbard at her side. Seeing him drawing closer, the blue-eyed Jonin checked to see if her outfit was straightened and alluring enough, and made sure her hair was okay. After which, she placed her hands on her hips and smirked at her unexpected visitor. It should be well noted that Ino had grown very well in years past. She's still the same height as Sakura today, and she's still exceptionally beautiful. Aside from her enhanced strengths, abilities and jutsus, Ino had also joined Anbu only last year, and her fighting prowess was increasing greatly through the extra training she was receiving from Anko, though her strength was nothing compared to the Hokage-trained Sakura. Of course, Ino was also starting to inherit a lot of those traits easily recognized in the purple-haired proctor, such as attitude, dominatrix, methods of torture, and well-sized. Naruto, however, could not tell the difference in size between Ino's and Sakura's. Needless to say, the spiky-haired Jonin found the blonde bombshell as equally attractive as Sakura, and had considered trying to go after her himself if she wasn't so involved with her teammates. Little did he know, however, was that Ino had dropped her crush on Sasuke long before he came back to Konoha with the new girl, and has now begun pursuing her secret attraction towards Naruto himself. It would be incredibly shocking news to him if he ever realized what Ino was daydreaming about in her free time. Well, Naruto, what brings you here? she asked, seeing him stop right in front of her, and return her smirk with a very handsome smile. His close proximity, as well as his grin, made Ino blush and look away briefly. Not much. I just wanted to see how you were doing, is all, Naruto replied, stepping around her, while looking the beautiful Kunoichi from top to bottom. Flexing his eyebrows in appreciation, the yellow-haired Jonin then pulled out one of the tickets from his jacket pocket and waved it in front of her. However, this did not tear the girl's attention away from his face or his form. And, seeing as that I've got no missions this afternoon, I was also wondering if you were available for tonight. You know, just to hang out, if you're not busy or anything, Naruto added. Ino, noting the obvious question, immediately decided upon her two choices, surprising the yellow-haired shinobi. Of course I'd like to hang out with you tonight. Ino exclaimed over flushed cheeks. Though her enthusiasm was noticeable, it was hard to miss the girl's slight nervousness and embarrassment when answering the question. She pushed some locks of her hair behind her ear and smiled in a very, very friendly manner, up at the handsome ninja gazing down at her. So, what did you have in mind, Naruto-kun? She asked, saying the last bit with a flirtatious tone dripping hotly from her tongue. Wow, if it was this easy to ask Ino out, I would have done so a long time ago, Naruto thought, blinking in surprise. He was completely oblivious to the lustful look Ino was giving her, as well as the down-toned inflection she used in her emphasis on, kun. Come to think of it, he also heard the same phrase come from Sakura's lips, only he didn't think anything of it, and assumed that to be just a kind reply from his teammate. He just shrugged it off. Well, she'll definitely make her yes official now. Smiling again, Naruto held out the ticket he was holding for her, the girl glancing down at it in surprise. That's great, Ino. Here, I won a couple of tickets to the hot spring resort, the 5-star spot downtown in the leisure district. This one's for you. Oh my gosh, Ino exclaimed, taking the ticket into both her hands and gazing down at it with wide eyes. Why you actually have unlimited, official passes to that place. How much do these things go for? Like, 500 ryu for one. My goodness. She gazed up at Naruto, eyes sparkling in a highly animated style with a streak of red flushed over her cheeks. This is incredible, Naruto-kun. Hey, think nothing of it. I really wanted you to come anyway, and to think I asked Sasuke to come first, tisk, bastard. I'm such a moron. Ino smiled, pocketing the ticket while giving Naruto a very friendly smile. Well, thanks a lot, Naruto. What time do you want me to meet you there? Meet me there at around 6 o'clock. I promise you, it's going to be really enjoyable. I'll be sure to keep that in mind. Ino exclaimed, nodding to him. See you there, Naruto-kun. Yeah, see ya, the Jonin replied, waving to her with a bright smile before walking off to his next destination. Ino watched the young man depart, her eyes guiltily trailing over his butt. The sight of it made her blush various shades of red, as well as making her insides feel sensuously warm. She licked her lips. Yummy, she exclaimed in her head. Can't wait to get a feel of that. Thinking of the prospects the night held for her and Naruto, Ino completely forgot about the burglar lying unconscious not too far from her. Loud shouts of effort could be heard echoing throughout the central compound of the Hyuga estate as a familiar, purple-haired Jonin was busy practicing and exercising her taijutsu skills. Packed on by chakra-inflamed punches in her self-developed form of the gentle fist style of fighting, the young Kunoichi was making incredible progress in her training. There were no faults in her fighting stances, no staggering from lack of balance, and no mistakes in her form whatsoever. She unleashed every attack perfectly with absolute precision, the blue flashes of chakra escaping every initiated attack being a clear sign of her effort. The purple-haired kunoichi known as Hinata was in her most superb form to date. She had grown quite well in the past few years, and in some places many guys gawk at today. Hinata presently was wearing a black turtleneck with the hem cut high to show off the flawless skin of her stomach, which was well shaped into her figure. The seemingly tight turtleneck had ninja mesh net sleeves that stopped just past the elbows, and the tightness of the top allowed a very generous view of her sized chest. Further down, she also wore tight black spandex pants with purple lines down the sides, and dark blue sandals to match. She mostly wore this outfit to training, so people rarely saw her wearing it outside of the estate. Furthermore, Hinata's hair had lengthened quite a bit, but not compared to when she was 16. Now she had it cut, so that it was tied back in a nice ponytail, which suited her rather nicely. She still had the bangs of hair hanging on either side of her face though, which framed her pretty face. Forward flipping through the air, Hinata landed soundlessly, crouched low into a sort of mantis fighting stance seen in Kung Fu, and began unleashing swift, smooth strikes and attacks, which were quick and precise. Every kick unleashed a streak of blue energy through the air, and every punch, a small burst of chakra. These accurate precision shots could easily leave any ninja incapacitated, unless their chakra circulation was formed into that of a human's. However, the blows would nevertheless be agonizingly painful. Hinata gritted her teeth as she quickened her pace and increased the strength of her blows, more and more chakra seen bursting out of every follow-up strike made, with booms of force heard reverberating off of the courtyard's walls. Letting out a growl of effort, she put forth a great deal of chakra into her hands, and began striking out in front of her, palms first, with superhuman-like speed. Against the side of a distant tree, which had been planted in front of the bordering wall, right in the girl's line of sights, thousands of chakra-generated needles suddenly became impaled in the tree trunk. They struck the tree in their masses, eventually beginning to slice through the wood and cut the tree into pieces. Hinata's assault eventually ended on the tree, resulting in it collapsing due to the change in weight distribution and the damage inflicted upon it. The dead tree was reduced to nothing but splinters. Panting from the effort the purple-haired Jonin had outputted, Hinata straightened back up from her stance and, concentrating on her breathing, relaxed her racing heartbeat. With sweat dripping down her body, the young kunoichi stretched out her arms, relieving her exhausted muscles and bones. Now that her training sessions were over for today, she felt a great need for a nice relaxing shower and a good afternoon of rest. Little did she know, however, was that a familiar face was to come her way with a very interesting proposition that she could not possibly refuse. It nearly made her jump out of her skin at his appearance. "Still training hard, I see, Hinata-chan," Naruto exclaimed, leaning against the side wall about 6 meters away from her to her right. The purple-haired shinobi gasped, and immediately locked herself into attention. Frozen where she stood, with her arms and legs snapped to her sides or together, and a bright red rush of blood coming to her face, the Hyuga girl couldn't help but immediately feel incredibly warm and embarrassed at the presence of this unexpected guest. When she replied to the young man's words, she did not glance around to look at him, for fear of fainting from overwhelming feelings. "NN Naruto-kun," Hinata said, her voice a whisper as she slowly glanced to her right. Without a doubt, she saw the spiky-haired Jonin standing right there in the shadows of the wall, his smile illuminating his face, with this particular look of admiration directed straight towards her. Unfolding his arms, the boy stood up off of the wall and walked over to her, the girl still standing stiffly, yet turned to meet him either way. Naruto stopped in front of her, giving her only a couple of feet of distance between them. He smiled down at her. "Your technique has improved greatly, your stances are flawless, your style unhampered by fatigue, and you've gotten much stronger. He glanced over at the destroyed tree, seeing the splinters rested on their own on the stone floor and the chakra needles disintegrating into energy particles, once again becoming a part of the air. The Jonin raised an eyebrow, clearly entertained by the sight in the previous one of the training girl before she stopped. I see your hell pin fire jutsu is coming along really well. Very nice. Hinata gulped, seeing Naruto's attention draw away for that brief moment, before he settled his sights on her once again. How long have you been watching, Naruto-kun? She asked. I'd say right up to the point you switched from advanced style taijutsu to high-level bursts of your gentle fist style of jutsu, Naruto stated, placing his hands on his hips and tilting his head down at the still blushing Hyuga. That too is an impressive feat. Most ninja of the Hyuga clan, including Neji, have been known to suffer from muscle stress the moment they unleash such taxing bursts of chakra and energy. On top of that, such a complex style of combinations, hey, I bet even Sasuke couldn't even keep up with you. You've been training your body well. Blushing to the roots of her hair, the Hyuga girl looked away, flattered to the utmost extent by her love interest's comments. Placing one hand over the cleavage of her shone at the front neck of her top and the other against her cheek in an attempt to cover up her blush, Hinata giggled and closed her eyes. Naruto-kun's impressed by my technique. She whispered in her mind, opening her eyes slowly and looking away through sparkling eyes. He is. I knew he would be. So, Hinata, Naruto began again, drawing the girl's attention back to him again. I was wondering, if you're not doing anything tonight. Hinata's eyes immediately widened upon hearing these words escape the Jonin's lips. Oh my gosh, is Naruto going to ask me out? Would you like to join me at the hot spring resort? He did. My goodness. What should I do? What should I say? Hinata thought, the blush on her face remaining and the shock she felt also expressed visibly. Naruto didn't think anything of it, and just took it as a part of her nature. It didn't bother him, he liked the way she blushed and always tried to hide herself away. Should I say yes or no? I have to say something. He's looking at me. Hinata stammered, trying to find the right words. She continued trying to hide herself. Her hand, now slightly curled into a fist, still held above her chest, and her other hand held low, her thighs pressed together tightly. I understand if you don't want to go, Naruto exclaimed, shrugging. It's that I really find your company very nice, hey. Shaking her head to remain conscious, the now more than shocked Jonin Kunoichi then glanced up at her love interest, staring him right in the eyes, holding herself from blinking. She gulped, taking in a deep breath of air to compose herself and nodding her head with all the confidence she can muster. Sure, Naruto-kun, Hinata exclaimed softly. I'd really like to join you tonight. The thought of the handsome, spiky-haired Jonin having passes to the most renowned spa area in Konoha didn't strike her as shocking at all. In fact, she was so used to the surprises the boy had that she just passed it off as some regular occurrence. Either that or she was too wound up on nervousness and shyness to trigger any other feeling or emotion when confronted by the yellow-haired shinobi. Naruto grinned, obviously pleased to hear her acceptance. Then, I'll see you at the hot springs. It's the 5-star place downtown. Here. The young man pulled out one of the passes from his jacket pocket and handed it to her. 6 o'clock, I'll be waiting there for you. Hinata shakily took it from him, and gazed down at the ticket with wide eyes and a stake of bright red across her cheeks. Reading what there was written on the pass, she then glanced up at the boy and smiled at him, also delighted that she had been asked out by the boy of her dreams. Naruto nodded back. See you there. he exclaimed in that husky tone of his whenever he addressed a girl with sincerity. Bowing to her in a show of gentlemanly appreciation, he then turned on his heel and left. Once he was out of sight, and was shown out by an incredibly honored Hyuga father, Hinata glanced down at her pass gripped in her hands tightly. Knowing that it had been Naruto that had given her this ticket, she began clutching it tightly to her, as if she had accepted a gift from Naruto. After all, in the years she has known him, Naruto always put his safety and his own well-being behind everybody else, caring more about those he treasured, and respecting them to his own full extent. Hinata knew that she was in love with him, not only because he was a handsome young man, but also because of those traits that made him special. His undying refusal to give up, his inner strength, and his way of the ninja. Hinata's eyes shone even more, a brighter smile joining her blush as she clutched the pass to her head and shuffled around on the spot shyly. Naruto-kun, man, this asking out girls thing is actually turning out to be a lot easier than I had anticipated. I mean, with Sakura and Ino, I expected them to have at least played hard to get. But now I'm just shocked. I didn't have to do any favors or anything. They're just attracted to your shining personality, Kit. Wow, really? Naruto asked as he continued walking down the street with a happy spring in his step. No, the Kyuubi replied sarcastically, rolling his eyes. Of course they are, you idiot. Geez, haven't you realized it yet? The girls love you. Huh, really? Awesome, Naruto exclaimed, his eyes widening on the outside and his jaw dropping slightly as these realizations were gradually beginning to reveal themselves. Of course, sharing these with his opposite, otherwise known as the nine-tailed demon fox confined inside of his body, was very enlightening, and shocking at the same time. But why? What is the real reason they like me so much? Dear God, even at 18, you're still as thick as a fruit. Kyuubi groaned, shaking his head at his master and host's stupidity. Even though he had come to respect the yellow-haired Jonin since Naruto became stronger than him, they silently agreed to treat each other as equals, yet fought like best friends. This was what is meant by them being opposites. Look, the truth is what I said before. You're a kind soul, Kit, strong up here in the head, and selfless to a far outstretched extent. You always put your friends' happiness before your own, which you have done for those girls countless times in the past, and you're always protecting them. Not only that, but they're not the only ones to have grown more attractive. Wow, though I'm really flattered by your words, Foxy, you're not really my type. You, Kit, Kyuubi growled, causing Naruto to grin on the outside. The point is, you've grown and changed, and so have they. You're not only at the peak of finding the perfect mate for you, but you're also the most perfect male bachelor ninja in the whole of this village. With most of the competition either taken or, just, stuck up bums and such, you've become the main affection of those girls. Even though they've liked you long before today. I kind of like where this is going. Naruto exclaimed. It was then a look of utter puzzlement, nervousness and thought suddenly crossed his expression, and the boy looked down at the floor in front of him. He stopped in his tracks. But, if I'm really going to choose one of these girls to be my girlfriend and/or life partner, then who? I mean, my heart is set out for all the girls, Sakura, Ino, Hinata, even Tenten. I haven't gone so far as to consider either one to be higher up the ladder than the other. I see your point, Kyuubi said, nodding his head in agreement. It was then a feral grin crossed the fox's face and he inwardly nudged at the image of the boy in his head. You're one lucky son of a bitch. I so wish I could still take over your body at my own will. What the hell are you getting at, furball? Come on. You so know what I'm talking about. If you can't choose one girl over the other, Kyuubi then smirked, an eye flashing. Then how about having all four of them? Naruto's face paled at this suggestion and prospect, before having it replaced by a full face blush. Feeling himself getting a little hot under his jacket and hair, the young Jonin fisted his hands tightly, cutting into his palms with his fingernails, so to keep himself from fainting due to high blood pressure. The pain did the job, but the embarrassment and dirty thoughts starting to seep in did an even bigger job downstairs. Growling, Naruto pounded his head with his cut fist, shouting at the fox in his head. "You are one dirty-minded demon, you stinking pervert," Naruto shouted. "And as if I haven't had my fair share of them." Memories took him back to old man Sarutobi, who was soon followed by Jiraiya, then the disturbingly terrifying Anko, and finally, incredibly enough, Tsunade. Naruto had had his fair, estranged sights of spotting the blonde-haired Hokage peering into the man's spa area from time to time, whenever Jiraiya went in. That saying went for the both of them. It was quite ironic, really. Naruto slumped forward in overwhelming distress, eyes overshadowed. My world is one of Ero Sennin's sick novels, and I'm the main character. Something tells me that you should have gone to see the movie. Okay. Though I'm not as perversely twisted as you are, or any of the others for that matter, Naruto restarted, clapping his hands together and taking in a deep breath. Taking all his thoughts into consideration, he let out all doubt and human decency out in one sigh in order to ask himself this question. Say I did try to get with all four girls. If I did make that particular move, how will all of them react to it? Will they be able to see reason behind my arguments of me liking them all equally, or will they just ignore it and murder me, leaving my blood-soaked corpse hanging from my apartment window, drawn and quartered? Wow, you're even more perverted than me. Hey, I take offense to that, says the protege of the world's most perverted Sannin in the country. The Kyuubi laughed, taking in Naruto's expression of dismay. Seriously though, if things turn out the way you plan it, and you play your cards right, I am absolutely certain that you'll emerge from this conflict intact, at the same time looking as though you've had the wildest and most pleasurable experience of your life. Alright, what are you getting at this time? Naruto asked, folding his arms and standing on the side of the road, continuing to engage in this weird conversation. Listen, setting aside all the killing and butchering of you in the near future, if this screws up, which it might, try piecing together all the little things we have talked about thus far. The Kyuubi began, raising up a tail as he began counting. Number 1. You're inviting all of the girls to the most relaxing hot springs in the village that they cannot possibly resist. Number 2. Each of these girls are harboring intense feelings of attraction towards you, as noted by their interactions around you. Number 3. All of you are at a suitable age to mate. Number 4. You've grown up very much to the girls' liking. Number 5. You are the perfect male for them, and with a lifelong personality that complements all four girls. Number 6. All the girls are close friends with each other. Number 7. You like them all equally. Number 8. You are thinking of mating with all four of them tonight. And number 9. I haven't seen you back down from a life-endangering challenge yet. Okay, yeesh. Naruto replied, fanning his flushed face. Alright, I admit that I want to, do that, with the girls tonight. But you're provoking it. It may not even happen if you keep carrying on the way you are. Shaking his head, he shoved his hands into his pockets and once again, started down the road towards where he knew Tenten would be at this time of day. Besides, I still have to see if Tenten-chan would like to come. If not, then 3 is good enough, right? Kyuubi said with a grin. If I know Tenten, then she's probably not as violent as Ino on a bad day. In fact, she was even worse. Aargh. Neji. You arrogant asshole. The brown-haired girl shouted as she threw a barrage of perfectly aimed kunai at a picture of the man she was venting her rage at. The kunai punctured the picture, striking the face at the eyes, mouth and forehead. She had long since this moment stopped throwing kunai one after another, and was now just pelting them. Panting heavily where she stood 15 meters out, Tenten, feeling slight relief over her target practice, growled and clenched her fists. Reaching behind her, she drew a cluster of ninja stars from her pouch, and threw them at the picture. They curved through the air, and struck the picture, tearing it to pieces. The barrage of ninja stars sort of did the trick for her, but she was still venting, and her outbursts weren't going unheard by a familiar yellow-haired Jonin hiding behind the trees for protection. After all these years, after everything I've done for him, he still doesn't notice me. Well, notice this, you glass-eyed jerk. She screamed, drawing a scythe knife from her pouch and hurling it at the tree. When it struck, it sliced right through the tree, impaling the picture and remaining stuck with its blade piercing right through the photo's forehead. It's not like we can all be serious workaholics like Sasuke. It's always training for you, and worrying about your students. It's all about you. Well, what about me? Wow, Naruto thought, glancing around the tree he was hiding behind. She's pissed. The Kyuubi, who was quietly resting in the boy's head, would have made one of his smart-assed comments at this statement of the obvious. But he was too stuffed and too bored to make any sort of remark whatsoever. I can't just walk up to her in her present state. She'll skewer me. Also joining the kunai impaled picture of Neji, there suddenly came a barrage of needles, which was then followed by a boomerang kunai, which took a big chunk of wood out of the tree, and not just tore the picture in half. Naruto raised an eyebrow in interest, finding Tenten's display of anger towards her teammate rather puzzling. For one, he never knew the girl could get so worked up over the lack of attention from the Hyuga elite, let alone expression her anger this way. One thing was for certain, Naruto has rarely seen Tenten ever get angry, only Sakura and Ino. He still found her quite pretty when she was angry all the same. Panting heavily again, Tenten eventually gave into her muscle fatigue and collapsed to her knees. Hunching over, the girl proceeded to catch her breath, giving Naruto the opportunity he needed to approach her safely. Smiling, the yellow-haired shinobi fixed up his scarf, and stepped around from behind his tree trunk. Unfortunately for him, he accidentally stepped onto a small branch, causing it to snap loudly, as well as the resting Tenten to respond in a very unexpected way. Growling, the girl stood up and, drawing a cluster of kunai, threw them into the trees where she heard the sound. Naruto, seeing this, let out a yell of shock and dropped down to the ground, the flying knives shooting off into the forest above him. Tenten, Naruto shouted. What did I do that made you throw kunai at me? Tenten, suddenly realizing who she had thrown her kunai at, gasped and ran over to where Naruto had hit the deck. Sitting up, the yellow-haired Jonin rubbed his chest where he had landed on a rock, and looked up to see the brown-haired girl kneeling beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder and checking for any serious injuries possibly inflicted by her. Oh my gosh, Naruto, I'm so sorry. Tenten fussed, looking him over frantically. I didn't know it was you. That's okay, it happens to me all the time. Here, let me help you up, Tenten exclaimed with a smile, pulling the staggered and no doubt, shocked Jonin to his feet. Once he was up, the young man brushed himself down and smiled up at the woman with the ox horn style of hair braiding. As always, Tenten was a friendly soul when she was cheerful, and always a real whiz to have around. In a way, she was sort of like Sakura, cheerful, strong, witty, and always willing to help out. She was also incredibly beautiful. Sorry about that, Naruto. I'm just not feeling myself today. So I could tell, Naruto pointed, smiling at her. Usually you would have hit me with that kind of attack. Good thing you weren't as thoroughly focused as I had thought. Well, heh. Tenten giggled, rubbing the back of her head and blushing in a bashful manner. It was just a reflex action. I might have hit you if I had gotten a better lock on you. Oh, I see, Naruto exclaimed, rubbing the side of his head nervously. I don't know if that's a good thing, or a bad thing. Giggling at the spiky-haired Jonin's grin, the girl blushed under his gaze as she moved her hand over her left side, pushing some stray hairs behind her ear. Shyly, she retraced her steps back to the curious reason why her friend was here, and decided to ask him about it. So Naruto, what's going on? You came here, obviously wanting to say something to me. Naruto blinked. It then clicked to him the reason why he came here and nearly got himself nailed to a tree. Boy was he lucky to have survived. Smiling again, the boy reached into his pocket, but kept it there for a fallback on his proposition. Oh yeah, the reason I came around was, well, if you're not too busy tonight, I was wondering if you would like to join me over at the hot spring resort. Huh, the hot spring resort? Tenten queried, wondering which establishment the young man was referring to. When the image of the place popped into her mind, the girl's eyes widened and she gazed at him in both disbelief and shock. You mean that 5-star spa downtown? You're inviting me to go there with you? Of course, Naruto exclaimed, pulling out his second ticket and holding it out. I mean, who wouldn't for such a lovely kunoichi like you? Are you interested? Tenten gazed down at the ticket, still awestruck and bewildered. Her mind was screaming, shocked to know that Naruto was asking her out. All the anger she had pent up inside her of Neji dissolved into shock, and the comment the Jonin passed on to her made her blush to the roots of her hair. Clearly, this was no proposition she was going to back down from, especially from such a handsomely grown shinobi she also had hidden affections for. Rubbing her right cheek, she reached out and grabbed the ticket, but didn't take it just yet. She looked up at him with a smile. I'd love to come, Naruto, Tenten began. But, I'm also wondering. Is anyone else coming? Oh, well, Naruto shrugged. I did invite some of the other girls. I thought that we could all hang out, you know, and get to know each other a little better. Oh, I'll get to know you a little better, Naruto, Tenten thought with a smirk. Even if that means prying you out of those other girls' hands, I'll get you. Knowing how available Naruto was, and how much he meant to her for all the things he has accomplished, she would not pass up something like this. She took the ticket, smiling in a very friendly manner up at the young male. I'll see you there, Naruto-kun. Naruto nodded, bowing to her in a highly honored action. Thank you so much, Tenten. I'll see you there too. 6 o'clock. Don't be late. With that, he straightened up and departed, waving to her and receiving a wave in return. Once he was out of sight, Tenten's determination and fighting spirit kicked in. Holding up a fist, she held it up with a very guy-sensei-like grin. Truly, she had picked up some of Lee's personality. We'll see where this goes. Tenten thought. Be prepared, Naruto-kun. Tonight is the night I make you mine. Now where the hell did I put it? No, let's see, nope, damn it. I know I put it around here somewhere. But where? Naruto shouted, frustrated that he was unable to find his favorite jacket. It had been about half an hour since he had gotten home, and the clock's minute hand was already moving into 5:30. Even though it was later in the afternoon than he had expected, the sun was still shining, and there was plenty of time for him to get washed up, and dress into his best for his night out. To top off this most anticipated of afternoons, he was going out with the 4 hottest kunoichis of his shinobi age group. He had to look his most casual best if he was going to make a good impression on them. Naruto had nothing to worry about in the value of the tickets or the hot springs they were admitted for either. Firstly, they expired to around noon tomorrow, which meant he could stay there all night if he wanted to. Furthermore, the hot springs were open 24/7, and not to mention the afternoons were always the best for spicing up high romanticism as well as making an impact on any guests or visitors. The yellow-haired shinobi was certain the night was going to go well. Quote exclamation mark. Where the hell is it? Unfortunately, things this afternoon were going off to a bad start. For the past 45 minutes since he had gotten home, he had been freshening himself up for tonight, washing his hair, face and redressing into some new clothes. He had deposited his usual attire into the laundry, including his scarf and mesh shirt. Free to dress into whatever outfits he wanted, Naruto picked himself out a white t-shirt, with blue jeans and matching blue sandals. All that was left was for him to find his orange and blue jacket, the one similar to the top he used to wear when he was younger, only this one had a white fluffy undercoat and collar. Obviously the boy's taste in orange hasn't faltered in these years, but his style certainly hasn't wasted away under all that orange. The main problem being was that he had no idea where he threw his jacket. Clothes came flying out of his open bedroom closet, accompanied by pairs of shoes, ninja scrolls, his infamous nightcap, several pairs of underwear, and a collection of vests and pants that were stashed at the very back of the dark and treacherous wasteland known as the storage center for his clothing. The young Jonin was muttering to himself and shouting various profanities, including ones never even heard of, as he dug and clawed at the piles of clothes he had just dumped in here. Because of all the missions he had been taking part in recent weeks, he had had little time to clear up his living area. As noted by the hundreds of clothes now tossed onto his bed. This is great. That's just great. If I can't find my jacket, I may as well go. Naruto growled, stumbling out of his closet and kicking at a random pile of clothes. Folding his arms, he glared around the now messy bedroom. Although, I don't think the girls would appreciate it if I just turned up in my birthday suit. They'd probably freak out and beat the living snot out of me. After fruitless efforts of trying to find his jacket inside of his closet, he decided looking through the other piles he had created instead. Plunging his hands through the small hills of material, he began pulling out one top after another, ignoring everything else. It was once he was through with the first two piles he gave up, looking up towards his lounge room and letting out a sigh of annoyance and disappointment. It was only then when he realized he left his jacket hanging on the couch's back, prepped and ready for the night. Slapping himself in the head for being so stupid, Naruto pulled himself to his feet and, after kicking his clothes into the closet and reminding himself to clean up the mess later, proceeded to his lounge room. Grabbing his jacket and putting it into his mouth, he reached down and began slipping on his sandals. Hopping on one foot towards the door as he secured the last sandal, he took the jacket out of his mouth and slipped it on. Checking to make sure he had his pass, keys and money, Naruto stepped out of his apartment and locked it up. Making sure he secured his keys in his pocket, the yellow-haired Jonin punched the air in front of him excitedly, skipping on the spot with his hands held up as if he were preparing himself for a fight. However, he was merely loosening his muscles and body for the main events, and once he had, the young man then took off on a quick-paced run down the road. Next stop, Konoha's hot spring resort. The Jonin ran down streets, passing pedestrians and buildings alike. Naruto made this run like an obstacle course, expertly weaving through crowds, sliding under obstacles moving or were lying across his route, or leaping over great distances like a super professional athlete. Even though Konoha was his hometown and the people were finally beginning to treat him right for all the things he has done for it, he still pulled out some old fast ones on the hidden village's soil. He treated this run like a military course, commando rolling here and there, and running over benches. Some of the villagers Naruto passed questioned this young man's rush and why he was doing his best to avoid everything. As always, Naruto had a very good reason to be in a rush, and as per his personality, treated every opportunity of endurance, speed, strength and skill as a test of his abilities. Within 5 minutes, he arrived, and was standing beneath the shadowing presence of a Shinto shrine archway. Having not even broken a sweat, the young male smiled up at the wooden arch, and read the name of the institute beyond its gate and up the stone steps into the fancy bathhouse. Kanahagakure Hot Spring Resort. Well, that's just stating the obvious, the Jonin thought, his sensitive nose catching a whiff of tub salt herbs wafting through the breeze from the structure. Smiling, Naruto glanced around the area, awing at its natural beauty and befitting design traits. The hot spring resort was simply blossoming with foliage, which grew in and out of the area as if this place was a part of the natural wilderness itself. Pink cherry trees flowered in the breeze, shedding their petals majestically. The winds blew these touches of blossom through bamboo emplacements like a flowing stream, accompanied by shrubs and plant life that was just spewing out a scent which Naruto found extraordinarily pleasant. Bonsai bushes, along with small shrines and bird houses, with a lovely lake and a miniature river flowing up front, caught the shinobi's keen eye. The building spoke for itself too, with a painted red and green roof to suit the surroundings, and every so often a golden warrior and goddess statue, and decorative framework. Everything was fitted in accordance with the feng shui law. This place is amazing, Naruto exclaimed, hands on his hips as he looked over the place again and again. Wow, now I can see why this hot spring is so pricey. It's paradise. Just wait till you see what's inside. A voice from behind spoke up, catching Naruto's attention in a jumping manner. Blinking, he turned around, and immediately came face to face with the ocean blue eyes of Ino Yamanaka. The young woman smiled friend Lily at the Jonin and waved, having come up to within 6 feet of him in an attempt to surprise him. Well, it definitely worked. Whoa, Ino-chan. Good afternoon, Naruto exclaimed, voice holding that hint of nervousness that indicated his unanticipated arrival of his early invite. Good afternoon to you too, Naruto-kun, Ino replied in a very friendly tone of voice. She stepped forward a bit more, running a hand through her hair and gesturing towards the shinobi suggestively. What do you think of my outfit? Is it okay? It was then, Naruto got a good look of the outfit his fellow ninja was wearing, and saw her donned in a purple tube top of Chinese light and dark lining tone, and design, with a black turtleneck worn underneath, which was closely followed up by a purple matching skirt, bicycle shorts and sandals. She also wore purple lace wing, and had her hair done up into a braided ponytail, matching her outfit. With the amount of skin to be seen, the outfit was very revealing, and Naruto couldn't help but linger over her body for several seconds longer before looking back up. Ino's gaze failed to falter from her lustful and suggesting visage. It's great, Ino, Naruto exclaimed, starting to feel a little bit hot under his headband. It suits you very well. It really highlights your beauty, and goes wonderfully with your eyes and hair, he added while pointing to her pale blonde locks. That certainly did the trick, Ino said in her head in a burst of delight. Well, I'm glad you like it, Naruto-kun. And I must say, you look very dashing in that outfit. The blonde complimented, stepping forward and playing with the corner of the jacket's fur collar. With every action she initiated, she did not make without a stride. The proximity at which she set herself with Naruto allowed her to feel the heat or arousal emitted off of him. I've never seen you in this outfit before. It really complements your body. Clearing his throat, the spiky-haired Jonin stepped back a bit, so to get some air. Well, cough, thanks very much, Ino-chan. You know how it is. I was saving this one for a special occasion, and since that occasion has come along, it would have been bold for me to wear my ninja gear to a resort like this, with, he said the last parts with a bit of hesitation, because he could have sworn Ino had stepped up even closer to him. Naruto